Be me, 29 years old and working as a software developer at a mid-sized tech company. Been coding since I was 14 and genuinely love what I do for a living. My name is Elliot, and I live in a decent one-bedroom apartment near the downtown area. Got a mass transit pass and ride the train to work every single morning. Life is pretty comfortable, and I have a solid group of friends both at work and outside. Girlfriend named Priya, who works in finance at a different company across town. We have been together for about 2 years now, and things are going really well between us. Company is called Nexus Digital Solutions, and we build software for healthcare clients mostly. About 200 employees total, split between developers and designers and sales and admin staff. Been working here for almost 4 years now and worked my way up from junior developer. Currently a senior developer and team lead for one of the main product teams. My team has 8 people, and we handle the patient portal software that hospitals use. The work is meaningful because we actually help real people access their medical information. Pays well, and the benefits are solid. And I genuinely like most of my coworkers. My team is a good mix of people with different backgrounds and skill levels overall. Got my buddy Warren, who is 34 and probably the best back-end developer I have ever met. There is also Terrence, who is 27 and handles most of our database architecture stuff. On the women's side, we have Claudia, who is 31 and an absolute wizard with front-end work. Also have Simone, who is 26 and relatively new, but learning quickly and shows real promise. Rest of the team is rounded out with contractors who come and go on different projects. We work well together and hit our deadlines, and the clients are generally happy with us. Our department head is a guy named Franklin, who has been here since the company started. He is in his early 50s and knows the code base better than anyone else in the building. Very hands-off management style, which works great because he trusts us to do our jobs, gives us autonomy, and backs us up when clients get demanding or unreasonable about timelines. The kind of boss who remembers your birthday and asks about your weekend genuinely. I have turned down recruiter calls because working for Franklin is worth more than extra salary. February rolls around, and Franklin calls a team leads meeting that feels different somehow. Walks in looking tired and older than I have ever seen him look before. Honestly, he sits down heavily in his chair and takes a deep breath before starting to speak. Announces that he has been diagnosed with a health condition that requires extended treatment. He is taking an indefinite medical leave starting at the end of the month, effective immediately. Company is bringing in someone from outside to cover his position while he is away recovering. The room goes completely quiet, and I can feel the anxiety building among everyone there. Franklin has been the shield protecting us from corporate nonsense for almost a decade now. Without him, we are exposed to whatever the executive team decides to throw at us. I ask if there is anything we can do, and he just smiles sadly and shakes his head. Tells us to keep doing good work, and he will be back as soon as he can manage. We all wish him well and try not to think about what comes next for us. March 1st arrives, and the new interim department head walks through the doors for her first day. Her name is Gretchen Holloway, and she comes from some consulting firm I have never heard of. First impression is intense energy and very deliberate movements, like everything is calculated precisely. She is in her early 40s, with short gray hair styled very deliberately and sharp features. Wears blazers with pins on them that I later learn are various activist symbols and slogans. Her email signature has pronouns and a quote about dismantling systemic oppression in the workplace. LinkedIn shows a background in organizational transformation and equity-centered leadership development consulting. First day, she sends a department-wide email introducing herself and her vision for us going forward. Subject line reads, "Building a more equitable nexus together," with 3 exclamation points at the end. I open it expecting standard corporate introduction fluff about collaboration and excellence and synergy. Instead, I find myself reading what feels like a manifesto about privilege and systemic oppression. She talks about how tech companies have historically been bastions of white male mediocrity, says she has been brought in specifically to address the toxic masculine culture in engineering, announces she will be conducting one-on-one meetings with all employees over the next 2 weeks. Attendance is mandatory, and we should come prepared to discuss our relationship with privilege. I look over at Warren, and he has the same expression of confusion that I am wearing. Terrence is reading the email with his eyebrows raised almost to his hairline in disbelief. Claudia looks uncomfortable and is avoiding making eye contact with anyone around her right now. Simone seems nervous and keeps glancing at the rest of us, trying to gauge our reactions. I tell everyone to stay calm and just get through the transition period professionally. Franklin will be back eventually, and things will return to normal once he recovers fully. My one-on-one meeting with Gretchen is scheduled for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. sharp. I arrive at her office exactly on time, because I have heard she is strict about punctuality. She gestures for me to sit in the chair across from her desk without looking up immediately. Spends about 30 seconds finishing something on her laptop before finally acknowledging my presence. "Elliot," she says, looking at me with an evaluating expression that makes me feel like a specimen. "I have reviewed your personnel file and your performance reviews from the past 4 years here. You have consistently received high ratings, and your team delivers projects on time or ahead of schedule. Your technical skills are clearly strong, and your team members seem to respect your leadership ability." I start to say thank you, but she holds up a hand to stop me from speaking. "However, I have also noticed some concerning patterns in your behavior and communication style here. You tend to dominate technical discussions, and your suggestions are frequently adopted by the team. This creates an environment where other voices, particularly women's voices, may feel marginalized and silenced. I am confused because I thought having good ideas adopted was literally the point of my job. I try to explain that I always encourage input from everyone on my team, regardless of gender. Claudia and Simone both contribute regularly, and I actively seek out their perspectives on problems. She cuts me off again with that same dismissive hand gesture that I am starting to hate. "Elliot, your intentions may be good, but impact the matters more than intent in these situations. The fact that you are defensive right now is actually evidence of the privilege I am describing. Men in your position rarely recognize how much space they take up in professional environments. I want you to start keeping a journal, documenting moments when you center yourself in discussions. Bring it to our weekly check-ins, and we will work on decentering your masculine energy together." I leave her office feeling confused and frustrated, and honestly, a little bit humiliated. Call Priya that night and vent for about an hour about the whole bizarre experience. She listens patiently and says it sounds like a lot of corporate buzzword nonsense to her. Suggests I just keep my head down and wait for Franklin to come back from leave. I tell her she is probably right and I should not make waves during the transition. We talk about other things, and I try to put the whole meeting out of my mind. Second week of March brings the first department-wide meeting under Gretchen's new leadership style. She stands at the front of the conference room with a presentation loaded on the big screen. Title slide reads, "Accountability and Growth, a new framework for engineering excellence together." She clicks to the next slide, and I feel my stomach drop when I see what is on it. The slide is titled Daily Privilege Acknowledgement Protocol and has bullet points underneath it. She explains that research shows acknowledging privilege reduces its harmful effects on marginalized groups. Starting next week, all male employees will begin each day with a brief privilege acknowledgement. This will happen at the morning stand-up meeting in front of the entire team gathered together. Men will take turns sharing one way their privilege manifests the previous day at work. Then, they will commit to one concrete action to center marginalized voices that current day. This practice will help create a more equitable environment where everyone can thrive equally. The room is completely silent, and I can see the men all looking at each other nervously. Warren catches my eye, and his expression says everything I am feeling without using any words. Terrence looks like he might actually stand up and walk out of the room right now. Even some of the women look uncomfortable, including Claudia, who is staring at the table intensely. I raise my hand because I cannot just sit here and let this happen without comment. Gretchen acknowledges me with a slight nod, and I try to choose my words very carefully. I have some concerns about how this practice might affect team dynamics and productivity overall. Requiring public confessions could create resentment and make collaboration more difficult between team members. Also, not sure this is legal from an HR perspective, given that it targets employees by gender. She smiles, but it does not reach her eyes at all, and I recognize that look now. Elliot, your discomfort with accountability is exactly why this practice is necessary for growth. The fragility you are displaying right now is a classic defensive response to having privilege named. And I assure you, this has been reviewed by our equity consultants and is entirely appropriate. Anyone else who has concerns can schedule time with me privately to discuss their resistance. Nobody else raises their hand because we all got the message loud and clear just now. Resistance will be documented and characterized as fragility and used against you in evaluations. Later, the meeting ends and everyone files out in silence, looking shell-shocked and defeated already. Warren pulls me aside in the hallway and asks what the hell we are going to do. I tell him honestly that I do not know, but we should not do anything rash yet. Maybe this will blow over, or maybe HR will step in once they realize what is happening. He does not look convinced, and honestly, I am not convinced either. But what choice do we have? Monday of the following week arrives, and it is time for the first privilege acknowledgement stand-up. My team gathers in our usual meeting area, but the vibe is completely different than normal. Everyone is tense and avoiding eye contact, and the usual morning chatter is totally absent today. Gretchen walks in with a clipboard and takes a position in the corner to observe us. She nods at me to begin since I am the team lead and should set the example. I stand there for a moment, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to say here. I guess yesterday I noticed that I interrupted Simone during a code review discussion. I commit to being more mindful about creating space for others to finish their thoughts first. Gretchen makes a note on her clipboard and gestures for the next male team member to go. Warren is next, and his jaw is clenched tight as he speaks through what sounds like gritted teeth. Yesterday, I took credit for a solution that was actually a collaborative team effort with others. I commit to explicitly attributing ideas to their originators, especially women and non-binary people, going forward. Terrence goes next, and he is clearly struggling to come up with something to confess publicly. Yesterday, I spoke in a meeting when maybe I should have let someone else talk. I commit to speaking less and listening more to marginalized voices in technical discussions from now on. Gretchen frowns slightly and makes another note, like she is grading his performance on this exercise. The women on the team are not required to participate, so they just stand there, looking uncomfortable. Claudia is staring at the floor, and Simone looks like she wishes she could disappear completely. This becomes our new morning ritual, every single day, without fail, for the next several weeks. Every stand-up begins with the men confessing privileges and committing to decentering themselves today. Gretchen rotates between teams to observe and take notes on the quality of our acknowledgments. She provides feedback via email afterward, telling us whether our confessions were sufficiently meaningful. One time, Warren got a warning because his acknowledgement lacked genuine introspection and felt performative. Terrence got called into her office because he seemed resentful, which undermines the purpose of the practice. The effect on team morale is immediate and devastating across the entire engineering department. The men barely speak anymore in meetings beyond what is absolutely necessary for the work. Nobody wants to risk saying something that will need to be confessed the following morning publicly. Every word feels like a potential trap that could be used against you later in some way. Collaboration has basically died because working together means potentially taking credit for shared ideas. People just do their individual tasks in silence and avoid interaction as much as humanly possible. Productivity numbers start dropping within the first month. But Gretchen has explanations for everything. Says we are in a transition period, and some disruption is expected during cultural transformation work. Says the previous productivity metrics were inflated by exploitation of marginalized labor. Anyway, says real productivity includes emotional labor and equity work, not just lines of code shipped. The clients do not seem to agree with her philosophy when their deliverables are late, though. We start getting complaints and escalations that Franklin would have shielded us from completely. April brings the first major incident that signals things are getting seriously out of control now. We have a critical bug in the patient portal that is affecting several hospital clients badly. Patients cannot access their test results, and doctors cannot update treatment plans in the system properly. This is a genuine emergency that requires all hands on deck to diagnose and fix quickly. I call an emergency team meeting to coordinate our response and assign tasks to people immediately. Everyone gathers, but the usual energy of a crisis response is completely absent from the room. Normally, the team would be throwing out ideas and volunteering for tasks and working together seamlessly. Instead, everyone is just sitting there, silently, waiting to be told exactly what to do specifically. I start assigning tasks, and Warren interrupts me, which is totally normal in a crisis situation. Actually, wait. He stops himself mid-sentence and looks over at Gretchen, who is observing from the corner. Sorry, I should let someone else speak first. Does anyone else have an idea about the database? Claudia looks up nervously and says she's not sure since databases are more Warren's expertise area. Warren looks at me with desperation in his eyes, because he knows what needs to be done, but he is terrified of being accused of dominating the discussion or taking up too much space. I tell him to just explain what he is thinking, because we have a real emergency here. He hesitates and looks at Gretchen again, who is writing something on her ever-present clipboard. I think the issue might be in the authentication service, but I could be wrong about that. This goes on for 20 painful minutes, with the men hedging every statement and apologizing constantly. We finally get tasks assigned, but it takes 3 times longer than it should have taken. The bug takes 2 days to fix instead of the few hours it would have taken before. Client sends a formal complaint and threatens to review their contract with us going forward. Gretchen blames the incident on years of accumulated technical debt from mal-dominated engineering practices. Does not acknowledge that her policies made an emergency response nearly impossible for us to execute. I start documenting everything that is happening in a private file on my personal laptop at home. Dates and times, and specific incidents, and quotes from emails and meetings with Gretchen directly. Not sure what I'm going to do with it yet, but I feel like I need a record. Priya sees me working on it one night and asks what I'm doing so seriously over there. I explain the situation, and she looks increasingly concerned as I describe the daily confessions. Babe, that sounds like a hostile work environment, and you should probably talk to a lawyer about it. I tell her I am not ready for that yet and want to see how things develop first. She makes me promise to at least consult with someone if things get any worse than this. May arrives, and the first resignations start hitting the HR department with increasing frequency. Warren comes to me on a Tuesday afternoon and closes the door to my small office behind him. Elliot, I got an offer from another company, and I am putting in my 2 weeks' notice today. I feel my heart sink, because Warren is irreplaceable and has been my closest ally through this. I ask if there is anything I can do to convince him to stay and ride this out. He shakes his head and looks genuinely sad about leaving me and the rest of the team. Man, I cannot take it anymore. The daily confessions are destroying my mental health completely. I wake up every morning dreading work and spend my evenings anxious about the next day. My wife says I have changed, and I am irritable all the time and not present at home. I got a therapist, and she said this job is giving me symptoms of workplace trauma. Actually, I have to get out before it does permanent damage to me and my family relationships. I tell him I completely understand, and I would probably do the same thing in his position. We shake hands, and I promise to give him a great reference wherever he ends up going. Terrence puts in his notice 3 days later with almost the exact same explanation for leaving. Says he cannot handle the psychological weight of daily public confessions of a privilege anymore. Says he feels like he is being punished every day for something he did not actually do. Says his self-esteem has cratered and he does not even feel confident in his technical skills now. 2 more male developers from other teams resigned that same week, citing similar reasons for going. The pattern is clear and impossible to ignore unless you are deliberately choosing not to see it. Gretchen calls an all-hands meeting to address what she calls the departure of those resistant to growth. Stands at the front and says the resignations are actually a positive sign of cultural transformation happening. Says people who cannot handle accountability work were never going to thrive in an equitable environment anyway. Says we are making room for people who are truly committed to justice and inclusion values. Says she is already working with HR to fill the positions with values-aligned candidates going forward. I look around the room and see the remaining men looking terrified and defeated and hopeless. The women mostly look uncomfortable because they can see what is happening, even if Gretchen cannot. I get a message from Claudia on Slack that afternoon, asking if we can talk privately somewhere. We meet in a conference room, and she closes the door and looks genuinely distressed about something. Elliot, I need to tell you something, but I am scared of retaliation if anyone finds out. I promise her that whatever she tells me stays between us, unless she says otherwise explicitly. She takes a deep breath and says, "The women have been talking among themselves about everything. None of them support what Gretchen is doing, and they think the privilege confessions are cruel. They feel like they are being used as props in some kind of performance they did not consent to. But they are afraid to speak up, because Gretchen has made it clear dissent will not be tolerated." I ask Claudia what she thinks we should do about the situation, given everything that is happening. She says she has been documenting things too, and several other women have done the same thing. They want to go to HR together, but need the men to join them to show it is not just complaints. I tell her about my own documentation, and we agree to coordinate and approach HR as a group. Feels like the first hopeful thing that has happened in months, and I actually feel some optimism. We set up a private Signal group with the people we trust to start organizing our approach carefully. June brings the crisis point that finally forces everything into the open for everyone to see. We have a major client presentation scheduled with a hospital network that represents 30% of our revenue. This is the biggest account we have, and losing them would be catastrophic for the company finances. Gretchen insists on attending the presentation to ensure equitable participation from all team members present. I try to explain that this client has specific expectations, and we need our strongest presenters there. She dismisses my concerns and says she will handle the equity aspects while we handle the technical content. Presentation day arrives, and we gather in the big conference room with video screens for the clients. Hospital executives are on the screens, looking serious, because they are evaluating whether to renew with us. I start the technical overview and get about 5 minutes in when Gretchen interrupts me suddenly. "Excuse me, Elliot, but I notice you have been speaking for a while without inviting other perspectives. Simone, would you like to share your thoughts on the architecture decisions Elliot just described for us?" Simone looks like a deer in headlights because she was not involved in the architecture planning at all. The clients look confused, and one of them asks if there is a problem with our presentation today. Gretchen jumps in before I can respond and explains our commitment to equitable participation practices. Says it is important that all voices are heard, especially those historically marginalized in tech spaces. The client executives exchange glances that clearly communicate they think we have lost our minds completely. Presentation stumbles along for another painful hour, with constant interruptions for equity check-ins throughout. We never actually get through all the material we needed to cover for the technical evaluation. 2 days later, the client sends formal notice that they are not renewing their contract with us. The email cites concerns about organizational stability and ability to deliver on technical commitments going forward. This is a $2.3 million annual contract, and losing it sends shockwaves through the entire company. Emergency executive meeting is called, and even the CEO, who is usually hands-off, gets directly involved now. People are panicking because losing a client this size means layoffs are almost certainly coming next. The CEO, whose name is Douglas Chen, requests a meeting with me directly to understand what happened. I have never been in the same room with him before, and I am nervous about the whole situation. He asks me to be completely honest about what has been happening in the engineering department. I take a deep breath and decide that this is the moment to lay everything out on the table. Tell him about the daily privilege confessions and the climate of fear and the documentation I have. Tell him about the resignations and the reasons people gave and the productivity collapse we experienced. Tell him about the client presentation disaster and how Gretchen's interventions torpedoed our biggest account. Douglas listens without interrupting, and his expression gets progressively more serious as I keep talking. When I finish, he asks if I have documentation to support everything I have just described to him. I tell him I do, and that multiple other employees, both men and women, have documentation as well. He asks me to send everything to him directly and to gather the other documentation from colleagues. Tells me not to discuss this conversation with Gretchen and to continue business as usual for now. I leave his office feeling like something might actually change, but also terrified of retaliation. The next 2 weeks are tense as we wait to see what will happen with everything. Continue the daily confessions, because Gretchen has not been told anything has changed yet. But the men are slightly less defeated now, because we feel like someone finally listened to us. Claudia and the other women submitted their documentation and statements to Douglas as well. Even Simone wrote a statement describing how uncomfortable she has been being used as a prop. The case against Gretchen is overwhelming when you see all the evidence compiled together completely. July 1st, Gretchen is called into a meeting with Douglas and the head of HR together. She walks in looking confident, like she expects to receive praise for her transformation work. I know this because I was asked to wait outside in case they needed my testimony directly. About 45 minutes later, the door opens and Gretchen walks out looking absolutely shell-shocked. Her face is pale and her hands are shaking, and she does not make eye contact with anyone. She goes directly to her office and closes the door, and does not come out again that day. An hour later, an all-department email goes out from Douglas announcing leadership changes effective immediately. Gretchen Holloway is no longer serving as interim department head and has been placed on administrative leave. An investigation into department practices will be conducted over the next several weeks by external consultants. In the meantime, a senior director from another division will be overseeing engineering operations temporarily. The daily stand-up format will return to standard technical updates until further notice from leadership. I read the email 3 times to make sure I am understanding what it actually says. The engineering floor erupts in quiet celebration as people realize what just happened here. Nobody is cheering loudly because we are all professionals, but the relief is visible on everyone's faces. Claudia comes to my office and gives me a hug, which is not normal for our working relationship. "Thank you for speaking up," she says, "because I know that took a lot of courage from you." I tell her it was a team effort, and she deserves as much credit as anyone else involved. We did this together, and hopefully things will get back to normal now that she is gone. The investigation takes about 6 weeks and involves interviews with almost everyone in the department. The external consultants are professional and thorough and seem genuinely shocked by what they uncover. They interview the men who resigned and get detailed accounts of why they felt forced to leave. They review the documentation we all compiled and find even more incidents than we knew about ourselves. The final report is apparently devastating, though most of it is kept confidential from regular employees. What we do hear is that multiple policies violated employment law and created a hostile work environment. Gretchen is terminated for cause in mid-August and does not receive any severance from the company. She apparently threatened to sue for wrongful termination, but backed down when lawyers reviewed her case. Heard through the grapevine that she is claiming to be a victim of backlash against progressive leadership, posting on LinkedIn about how corporations punish women who challenge patriarchal power structures in workplaces. Some people in her network are supporting her narrative, but anyone who knows what happened sees through it. She will probably land somewhere else and do the same thing, because people like her never learn. September brings the best news we have had all year when Franklin returns from medical leave. His treatment went well, and he has been cleared to return to work on a reduced schedule initially. Walking into the office and seeing him at his desk again feels like the world is right once more. He calls a team leads meeting and apologizes for what we went through while he was away. Says he had no idea what was happening and would have intervened if he had known about it. I tell him it was not his fault, and he needed to focus on his health during that time. The company brings back Warren and Terrence with raises and apologies for what they experienced here. Both of them were still available because they had not been gone very long. Fortunately, other employees who left are also offered their jobs back with similar terms and conditions. Some accept, and some have moved on and found better situations, which is understandable, honestly. The team slowly rebuilds, and the culture slowly returns to what it was before Gretchen arrived. People actually talk in meetings again and collaborate on problems without fear of being accused. October rolls around, and we win back a major client who had left during the chaos period. Turns out they were unhappy with their new vendor and heard about our leadership changes and stability. Douglas gives a company-wide address praising the engineering team for our resilience during difficult times. He specifically thanks the employees who came forward with documentation and helped expose the problems. Does not name us individually to protect privacy, but we know who he is talking about specifically. Announces new policies requiring external review of any leadership hires and technical departments going forward. I get promoted to engineering manager in November, which comes with a significant raise and new responsibilities. The promotion letter specifically mentions my leadership during the crisis and my integrity in speaking up. I think about how close I came to just keeping my head down and waiting for things to pass. If I had done that, Warren and Terrence would still be gone, and things might have gotten worse. Sometimes the risk of speaking up is worth taking, even when it feels terrifying in the moment. You have to trust that the truth matters, and that eventually the right people will listen to it. Priya takes me out to dinner to celebrate the promotion at a nice restaurant downtown together. She tells me she is proud of me for standing up for what was right despite the risks. Says she knew when I started documenting everything that I was going to do the right thing. I tell her I could not have gotten through any of it without her support and patience. She rolls her eyes and says, I am getting sentimental, but I can see she appreciates it. We toast to surviving the year and to better things ahead in the future for both of us. December arrives, and I get a message from Claudia asking if I saw the news article online. Apparently, Gretchen landed a new job as Chief Equity Officer at some startup in another city. The startup is venture-funded and makes an app for something related to social justice organizing. Her LinkedIn announcement talks about bringing her transformational leadership experience to the new role. The comments are full of congratulations from people who have no idea what she actually did here. Part of me wants to comment and warn them, but I know it would not make any difference. Show the article to Warren at lunch, and we have a dark laugh about the whole situation. Some people fail upward and never face real consequences for the damage they cause to others. She will probably do the same thing there and eventually get pushed out after causing chaos. Then she will land somewhere else, and the cycle will repeat until she decides to retire. People like that never learn because they are incapable of seeing themselves as the problem. They always find external explanations for their failures that preserve their self-image as heroes. But that is not my problem anymore, and I refuse to waste energy thinking about her future. My team is strong again, and our clients are happy, and my career is on a good trajectory. Franklin is healthy and back in charge, and the company has learned lessons from what happened. The men who suffered through those months have healed, and most of them are doing better now. The women who were used as props have been heard and validated and feel respected again. It took a lot of pain to get here, but we came out the other side stronger, together. I think about the person I was at the beginning of this year, before Gretchen arrived. I was comfortable and maybe a little complacent, and thought keeping my head down was always smart. I learned that sometimes you have to risk your comfort to protect yourself and others from harm. I learned that documentation matters, and collective action matters, and speaking truth to power matters. I learned that most people want to do the right thing if someone gives them the opportunity. And I learned that toxic leadership eventually collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. Sit at my desk on the last day of the year, looking out the window at the city skyline. The office is quiet because most people are out for the holidays with their families and friends. I am just finishing up some administrative stuff before taking my own vacation time next week. Priya and I are going to visit her parents for the new year, which should be nice. Her mom makes amazing food, and her dad tells stories that go on forever but are actually interesting. Simple pleasures that I appreciate more now than I did before this year taught me some lessons. Get a notification on my phone that Franklin posted something in the team's Slack channel just now. It is a photo of him with his wife on a beach somewhere, warm-looking, happy, and healthy. Caption says, "Grateful for second chances and good people," with a heart emoji at the end. I smile and react with a thumbs up and close my laptop and pack up my bag to leave. Walk out of the office into the cold winter air, feeling content with how things turned out. My face when the feminist boss demanded daily apologies and then lost everything she built. And somehow I ended up promoted, with a stronger team and a better appreciation for life. Sometimes you just have to survive the storm and trust that the sun will come back eventually. Keep putting one foot in front of the other and do the right thing when it matters most. The people who try to tear others down usually end up tearing themselves down instead. Just have to be patient and document everything and wait for the truth to come out. Happy New Year to everyone, except Gretchen, who is probably making some other company miserable right now. Wherever you are, I hope you eventually learn that leadership is about lifting people up, not breaking them down. But I am not holding my breath, because some people are committed to learning nothing from their failures. Anyway, that is my story, and I am glad it is over and I never have to think about it again. Time to go home and start the new year fresh with hope and optimism for whatever comes next.